clear? And about the consumer's equilibrium, budget line, then the some exceptional steps of indifference curve and some linear equilibrium, and then corner equilibrium, then shift of budget line, about the consumer equilibrium through indifference curve, and soon about the corner equilibrium concave indifference curve, like that. Today we discuss about the price effect as combination of income effect and substitution effect. A consumer's equilibrium position is affected by the changes in his income, prices of substitutes, and changes in the price of goods consumed. These effects are known as income effect, substitution effect, and price effect. Income effect. And why are given. Thus, given the taste and preferences of the goods, if the consumer of if the income of the consumer changes, the effect it will have on his purchases is known as the income effect. That means income can influence the consumer's equilibrium. If other things remaining constant, if income changes, then what happens? Automatically, consumer's equilibrium also changes. That what is changes in equilibrium, that is called as income effect. The income effect may be defined as the effect on the purchases of consumer caused by the changes in income. If the prices of other goods remain constant, if the prices of goods remain constant, then the income of the consumer increases, his budget line will shift to the right, or parallel to the original budget line. On the other hand, a fall in his income will shift the budget line inward to the left. The budget lines are parallel to each other because relative prices remain constant. Assumption of income effect. The prices of both the commodities X and Y remain constant. Taste and preference remain constants. Then there is no change in fashion and market conditions. Then kinds of income effect. Income effect may be three types: positive income effect, negative effect, or zero income effect. Then positive the income effect is positive. In case of normal goods, income effect only normal goods. Then negative income effect. Income effect is negative when with the increase in his income, the consumer reduces his consumption of the good. Income effect is negative in case of inferior goods. Inferior good is the case of income negative income effect. Then zero income effect. If with the change in income, there is no change in the quantity purchase of a commodity, or there is not any change in the quantity demanded, then the income effect is said to be zero. Zero income effect is in case of goods like medicines, essential goods like salt. Means zero income effect has not changed if there is any change in income, has not any change in the quantity purchase of a commodity. These three effects, income effects, positive income effect and zero income effect, is based on the types of goods. All the three effects can be explained with the diagram. Then the budget line is B1. In the 5.8 18. Then the equilibrium point is X, where it touches the indifference curve I1. If now the income of the consumer increases B1, then what happens? Then that B1 will move to the right as the budget line B2. Then B2 is the new budget line which is parallel to B1 and it is right to the B1. And the new equilibrium point is X1, where it touches the indifference curve I2. As income increases further, B3 becomes the budget line with the X2 as its equilibrium point. The locus of these equilibrium points X, X1 and X2 traces out and trace a curve which is called the income consumption curve. When we connect or intersect all the points, then a curve is drawn. That is income consumption curve. The ICC or income consumption curve shows the income effect of changes in consumers' income on the purchases two goods given their relative prices. So, when the income increases, the income effect is both the goods are preferable. But normally, when the income of the consumer increases, he purchases larger quantities of two goods. Usually, the income consumption curve slopes upward to the right, as shown in the figure. Here, the income effect is also positive, and both X and Y are normal goods. That means when both goods are X and Y goods are normal, that time income effect is positive. But an income consumption curve can have any shape provided does not intersect an indifference curve more than once. The second type of indifference curve, income consumption curve may have a positive slope in the beginning but become and stay horizontal beyond a certain point when the income of the consumer continue to increase. In case where X is superior good and Y is a inferior good or Y is a necessity, that time ICC curve will be shown like this way. First it increasing, then it is horizontal straight line. Here, in the 5.19 figure, the ICC curve slopes upward with the increase in income up to the equilibrium point R. Then, at the budget line, then budget line P1, Q1 on the indifference curve I2. Beyond this point, it becomes horizontal, which means that the consumer has saturation point regarding consumption of good Y. His income, he cannot buy further the Y commodity because it is necessity commodity. But besides this, he can purchase more and more of good X because it is a superior good. So it often happens in the case of necessity like salt, which demand remains the same. Even when the income of the consumer continues to increase further, but here Y is necessity good, but good X is superior than the Y good. In this case, X is superior good, Y is necessity good. And here the income consumption curve is first it is decreasing, then it came to a horizontal shape. Further, suppose the demand of inferior goods, what happens? The demand of inferior goods falls when the income of the consumer increases beyond a certain level and replaces them by superior substitutions. For example, he may replace coarse grains by wheat or rice and coarse cloth by fine variety. It is described in the 5.20 diagram. It can be observed from there that in that diagram, good X is inferior good or necessity good and good Y is the superior good. In that case, what happens? That up to R, the ICC curve has a positive slope, and beyond that, it is negatively inclined. The consumer's purchases of X he can only prefer good Y because if compared to X good, the Y good is superior. The different types of income consumption curve are also shown, where ICC1 then ICC2 is a horizontal form A. Then why the necessity of which the consumer does not want to have more than the usual quantity of his income increases further. That means here what happens? X is a normal good, while Y is the necessity good, for which first it positive slope, then it is the horizontally straight line. Then ICC3 is a vertical form A. Y is a normal good. Here X is stated as necessity good. Then ICC4 is a negatively inclined downwards. Y becomes an inferior good from A onwards and X is superior good. And in case of ICC4, X is superior good, Y is inferior good. And in case of ICC, X is an inferior good. Not that. Then curve is like first it positive slope, then it is negatively upward. That means the X commodity is falling, the X commodities purchasing falls down. Then substitution effect. Hardin means substitution effect. Substitution effect relates to the change in the quantity demanded resulting from a change in the price of one good. It prompts the substitution of relatively cheaper good for a dearer one, while keeping the price of the other good, real income and taste of the consumer are its constant. Here, the price of the good, then the income of the consumer and taste of the consumer is remaining constant. Besides this, if there is two substitute goods are present, then what happens? The one is cheaper and one is dearer at that time. Then the price of one good is increased. Then Professor Hicks has explained the substitution effect independent of the income effect. A commodity income is called compensating variation and is shown graphically by a parallel shift of the line. Budget line until it become tangent to the initial indifference curve, so that it can be explained. It is called as Hicksian substitution effect, and it can describe with a diagram. Thus, on the basis of the methods of compensating variation, the substitution effect price of good X is so withdrawn the increase in the real income, the consumer, the price fall. Then withdrawn his income. The consumer is neither better off nor worse off than before. It is constant, that real income. The substitution effect is explained with the diagram 5.22, where the original budget line is PQ with the equilibrium at point R on the indifference curve I1. At R, the consumer is buying OB of X and BR of Y. Suppose the price of X falls, so that his new budget line is PQ1. With the fall in price of X, the real income of the consumer increases. To make the compensating variation in income, good Y or Q1N of good X, so that its budget line PQ1 shifts to the left as MN, which is parallel to PQ1, that new line, and it is intersect I1 at point H. H. Mn is a tangent to original indifference curve I1 at point H. The consumer buys OD of X and DH of Y. Thus, PM of Y on Q1N of X, Q1 of NX represents the compensating variation in income, and the line MN being tangent to the curve I1 at point H. Now, the consumer substitutes X for Y and moves from point R to H. The substitution effect is always negative, because when the price of a good falls or rises, more or less of it would be purchased, the real income of the consumer and price of the other good remaining constant. In other words, the relation between price and quantity demanded being inverse, the substitution effect is negative. Here, the always in compensating variation in Hicksian analysis, the real income is come to the previous period. Before that, if there is any decrease in the price of goods, besides this, the sum which amount is real income increase, it can be withdrawn, and then a new budget line is the initial indifference curve intersect the new budget line at point H, which is the new equilibrium point, and the movement from R to H is the substitution effect. Then price effect. Change when its price changes, given his income, taste and preference, and the price of good Y constant. Out to the right as PQ1, showing that the consumer will buy more X than before as X has become cheaper. Now the X is cheaper because of the price falls, so that now the consumer is represented by the budget line being drawn inward to the left of the original budget line towards the origin. So, if you regard PQ2 as the original budget line, a 2-time rise in the price of X will lead to the shifting of the budget line to PQ1 and PQ2 minus PQ. Each of the budget lines fanning out point from P is a tangent to an indifference curve I1, I2, and I3 at R, S, and T respectively. The curve PCC, price consumption curve, connecting the point R, S, and T, the equilibrium points. The price consumption curve indicates the price effect of a change in the price of X on the consumer. In this diagram, price effect can be shown. Then how the measuring income and effect of price change. When price change, how can we measure income and substitution effect? The change in consumption basket due to change in the prices of consumer goods is called price effect. Price effects combines two effects, income effect and substitution effect. Income effect is the result of increase in the real income due to decrease in price of commodity. Substitution effect arising due to substitution of costly good by cheaper good. This represents the decomposition of income and substitution effect, or price effect can decompose the income effect and substitution effect. There are two approaches for the decompositions, Hicksian approach and Slutsky approach. Hicksian approach uses two methods. One is compensating variation in income, another equivalent variation in income. Slutsky uses to decompose price effect into two compensated parts. Hicksian or compensating variation approach. In this method of decomposition of price effect into income and substitution effects by compensating variation, income of the consumer is adjusted so as to offset the change in satisfaction and bring the consumer back to his original indifference curve. That is his initial level of satisfaction before the change in price. That means here the substitution effects is happened in the compensating variation. That means the income of the consumer is adjusted as before, and their satisfaction is not changed. While with the fall in price of a commodity, a consumer moves to a new equilibrium position at a higher IC curve. That means at a higher level of satisfaction. Obviously, when price falls, that the commodity is cheaper than before. At that time, what happens? The consumer will prefer higher level of satisfaction and goes to the higher position of equilibrium. To offset this increase in satisfaction resulting from a fall in price of the good, one part of income is taken back to force him to come back at indifference curve. At that time, what happened? The extra income, extra real income can be withdrawn from him, and he must be come back to at his original indifference curve. This requires reduction in income to cancel out the gain in satisfaction or welfare on account of by reduction in price of a good. It is called compensating variation in income. The effect is called compensating variation in income because it compensates for a gain in satisfaction resulting from a price reduction of the commodity. Process of decomposition of price effect into substitution effect and income effect through the method of compensating variation in income is presented with a diagram. In the diagram, that when the price of good X falls, budget line shifts to PL2. Original budget line was PL1. The original budget line, now the new budget line shifts to PL2. That means real income of the consumer. He can buy more of both the goods with his increased income. With the new budget line PL2, consumer is equilibrium at point R on higher indifference curve IC2 and enjoy increasing satisfaction as a result of fall in price of goods due to fall in price of X. What happened? Now the new budget line PL2 is drawn, which is now in the new budget line, the consumer is prepared more X commodity and the new equilibrium point is R. And the suppose money income of the consumer is reduced by the compensating variation in income, so that he is forced to come back to the original indifference curve IC1. Now he would buy more of X since X has now become cheaper. Relatively cheaper than before. With the reduction in income by compensating variation, budget line will shift to AB, which has been drawn parallel to PL2, so that it just touches the indifference curve IC1, on which he was before the fall in price of X. It is initial indifference curve IC1, where before the price falls, the consumer can be got his satisfaction. Now, after the real income withdrawn from him, now he come back to his initial indifference curve, and he buy more commodity of X because of the price falls, but less of the Y. Since the price line AB has got the same slope as PL2, where it is because of the parallel. It represents the change relative prices with X being relatively cheaper than before. Now, X being relatively cheaper than before, the consumer, in order to maximum his satisfaction in the new price income situation, substitutes X for Y. Thus, when the consumer's money income is reduced by the compensating variation in income, the consumer moves along the same indifference curve IC1 and substitutes X for Y. At price line AB, consumer is in equilibrium at S at indifference curve IC1 and buying MK more of X in place of Y. This movement from Q to S on the same indifference curve IC1 represents the substitution effect. Since it occurs due to the change in relative prices alone, real income remaining constant. If the amount of money income which was taken away from him is now given back to him, then what happens? He will move from S at indifference curve IC1 to R on a higher indifference curve IC2. The movement from S at lower indifference curve to R on a higher indifference curve is the result of income effect. Thus, the movement from Q to R due to price effect can be regarded as having taken place into two steps. First, from Q to S as a result of substitution effect, and second, from S to R as a result of income effect. Thus, price effect is the combined result of substitution effect and an income effect. So, in the diagram, the various effects on purchases of goods are price effect Mn, substitution effect Mk, income effect Kn. Mn equal to Mk plus Kn. Then price effect equal to substitution effect plus income effect. Sluxy, then Hicks described with show a diagram with the two methods. First, compensating variation in income, then equivalent variation in income. Then Sluxy's method, post difference approach. In Sluxy's approach, when the price of goods changes and consumers' real income or purchasing power increases, the income of the consumer is changed by the amount equal to the change in its purchasing power, which occurs as a result of the price change. His purchasing power changes by the amount equal to the change in the price multiplied by the number of units of the good, which the individual used to buy at the old price. That means in Sluxy's approach, income is reduced or increased by the amount which leaves the consumer to be just able to purchase the same combination of goods if he so desired, which he was having at the old price. That is, the income is changed by the difference between the cost of the amount of good X purchased at the old price and the cost of purchasing the same quantity of X at the new price. Income is then said to be changed by the cost difference. Thus, in Slutsky substitution effect, income is reduced or increased, not by compensating variation, as in case of Hicksian substitution effect, but by the cost difference. Slutsky substitution effect is explained with a diagram. Initially, with a given money income and the given price of two goods as represented by the price the consumer is equilibrium at point Q on the indifference curve IC1, where consumer is buying OM units of good X and O as a result of this fall in price of X, the price line will shift to PL1 and the real income or the purchasing power of the consumer will increase. Obviously, when price falls, the real income or purchasing power of the consumer will increase. In order to identify Slutsky's substitution effect, consumer's money income must be reduced by the cost difference or by the amount which will leave him to be just able to purchase the old combination Q if he so desires. That means now the amount which will leave him to be just able to purchase the old combination Q, if that amount is taken away, reduced from him. For this, a price line GH parallel to PL1 has been drawn, which passes through the point Q. It means that income equal to PG in terms of Y or LH in terms of X has been taken away from the consumer, and as a result, he can buy the combination Q if he so desires, since Q also lies on the price line GH. Consumer will not now buy the combination Q since X has now become relatively cheaper and Y has become relatively dearer than before. The change in X for Y, but in this Slutsky substitution effect, to the new price income circumstance is now where point S. Therefore, the consumer will now be in equilibrium at point S on a higher indifference curve IC2. This movement from Q to S represents Slutsky substitution. Important to since the effect money income been substituted for NW of Y. I is the prefer more of X because Marshallian theory, law of diminishing theory, we discuss of the derivation demand curve from the equimarginal utility, like that derivation of demand curve from indifference curve. A demand curve shows quantity of good purchased or demanded at various prices. Assume the taste and preference of a consumer, his income, and prices of all related goods remain constant. Demand curve showing relationship between price and quantity demanded. Price consumption curve of indifference curve. Price consumption curve of indifference curve analysis, we can run quantity demanded curve. In Marshallian utility analysis, demand curve was derived on the assumption that utility was cardinally measurable and marginal utility of money remained constant. And the quantity of the good is measured in the x-axis. Budget lines showing different prices of good X. Budget line PL1 so that price of the good X is and budget line and the price of good is rupees 10. With further fall in the price of rupees 7, 7 rupees 50 paisa, the budget line takes the new position PL3. The PL3 shows that price of good X is 7.5. When price of good X falls to rate 6, PL4 is the relative budget line. As price falls of the good X, then the price line PL1 shift to PL2, and as further it falls, then it shift to PL3 and then PL4. Tangency points between the various budget lines and indifference curves, which when joined together by a line, when a line that is price consumption curve, that shows the point Q1. As price falls, the equilibrium point is the Q3 at point four and the IC4 when price fall to range rupees 10, there be so that the consumer can prepare more of that good, that is OB, then OC, then OD. Then, in other words, the consumer demands OB units of price consumption would against various prices. ECC price consumption curve is nothing else but it shows the different shows the quantity demanded of the goods X against various prices. In most cases, the demand curve of individuals will slope downward to the right because at the price of a good falls, both the substitution effect and income effect pull together in increasing the quantity demanded of the good. Even when the income effect is negative, the demanded curve will slope downward to the right if the substitution effect is strong enough to overcome the negative income effect. Only when the negative income effect is powerful enough, that time the substitution effect can be demand curve slopes upward to downward. In of higher price outweighing the substitution effect in the sector. So sloping of demand curve, that is income effect and substitution effect. Both the income effect and substitution effect usually work towards increasing the quantity demanded of the good when its price falls, and this makes the demand curve slope downward. But in case of given good, the demand curve slopes upward from left to right. This is because in case of given good, income effect which is negative and works in opposite direction to the substitution effect, so that the it is upward slope. This results in the fall in the quantity demanded of the given good when its price falls, and therefore the demand curve of a given good slopes upward from left to right. This can be also present with the help of a diagram. Here, the indifference curve of a given good along with the various budget lines showing various prices of the good. Price consumption curve of a given good slopes backward. It is upward sloping. Because of that, the demand curve also is upward sloping. From this figure, that with the budget line PL1, the consumer is equilibrium at Q1 on the consumer consumption curve PCC is purchasing OM amount of the good with the fall in price from P1 to P2 and shifting a budget line from PL1 to PL2, consumer goes to the equilibrium position Q2 to Q3, at which he buys OM2 amount of the good. M2 is less than OM1. Thus, with the fall in price from P1 to P2, the quantity demanded of the good falls. Likewise, the consumer is in equilibrium at Q3 with price line PL3 and is purchasing OM at price P3. With this thing, we can draw the demand curve as is drawn in the lower portion. It can be seen that the demand curve of a given good slopes upward to the right, so that the quantity demanded because in given good is a negative, gives the negative slope of demand. In this discussion, we learned about the consumer and subject to given prices and his given income. In indifference curve analysis, the point of maximum satisfaction is achieved by studying with the help of indifference map. Then budget line or price line. Price line is also nothing else. It is just represent all possible combination of two goods that a consumer can purchase with his given income and the given prices of two goods. We also discuss about the MRS, marginal rate of substitution, which is equal to the ratio of prices of X good and Y good, and the equilibrium of the consumer's equilibrium, and then what is substitution effect, what is income effect, and also how can the price effect decompose with the income effect and substitution effect, and also Slux's substitution effect. And I will discuss about the derivation of demand curve from indifference curve with edge normal goods and also from the inferior goods. So this today we finished the block 2 chapter, block 2 section, and here we know all the things and it is briefly discussed. And then next tomorrow we start about the production and cost. And in this chapter there is some possible questions are arise, and properties of indifference curve, what is MRS, marginal rate of substitution, what do you mean by budget line, how can consumer equilibrium can be derived, and what do you mean by compensating variation method, and with the help of what do you mean by income effect and kinds of income effect. These are some possible questions which can be derived from this chapter. So today we finished all the block 2. Tomorrow we go to the block 3. Thank you.